The September 3rd PFF Forecast, and this one is a monster. We are doing every single win total. No one better to do it with than Kevin Clark, so it's win totals and Kevin Clark. Let's rock. All right, I'm recording this. This was a long podcast, so I'm recording this after the fact. No need really to do an intro. I will say this. I still have a story from being on an airplane that I've not told Eric yet, and when I do tell him, he may fall off his chair. I don't know how he'll react, but I'm going to do that on Monday. And that's, by the way, week 1. We're going to have games next week. So enjoy Kevin Clark. He's awesome. We go through every single win total. It's long. Maybe split it up. Mow the lawn. Do what you got to do. But this was a fun one. So here we go. Kevin Clark. It is wonderful to bring back Kevin Clark of The Ringer NFL show, host of Slow News Day. Jeff Fisher. My excitement is through the roof for that episode. Is it the 8th of September that one's coming out?
That's correct. Yeah, next Tuesday.
So wait a second.
So everyone can have...
You interviewed him on 9/8 and not 8/8?
So that joke has been made. Or 9/7. The big joke was, why isn't it coming out on the 7th?
Yeah, right.
That would have been 9/7, but that's Labor Day, and it turns out we want people to watch and not be at the beach. So 9/8 it is. Everybody watch. He was an incredible guest, like one of the best we've ever had.
I thought he was great when they did the last time they did Rams for Hard Knocks, as well as the one year they did, was it All or Nothing, the year they moved to LA, and I thought he was a great character in that show.
He has become really popular among, just the Twitter sphere and everything, and I wonder how quickly someone asks him to go into a booth or do his own, kind of media thing.
Yep.
Maybe, Kevin, you guys could do a mustache sort of thing.
We talked a lot about. He brought up mustaches 2 or 3 times. I don't know how many actually make the episode, but we talked about it. He has been in a booth, but I don't think a guy like that. I don't think guys like that should be in the booth, because they're going to get 30 seconds to talk, and they're just going to, if they're kind of an old school guy, they're going to give old school talking points. I think that he would actually be great at like just popping on a podcast or being a co-host of a podcast, something like that, where there could be someone who could bring it out. Like, I just feel like he's really funny. He has funny stories. Like I asked him like for a Steve McNair story, and he had just like 2 minutes to just, perfection. But he also had like a Yellowstone take. So I'm pro Jeff Fisher, and I think that guys like that sometimes get. I think that guys like that get kind of pigeonholed a little bit, and that part of that is my fault and our fault. Like, Bill O'Brien, he might be a great hang. He's a terrible GM, but he might be a great hang. And so I kind of think I kind of like connecting with those guys and just seeing what they're actually like, because I think the coaching persona sometimes overshadows what they're really like.
Well, who did you were on Mina Kimes' podcast the other day, and you were talking about Matt Patricia in such a light where there might be, like, I do agree that like he's looked pretty good over the last month or so in terms of the way he's related to his players. Now that might not mean he's a good head coach, but there's certainly different like facets of life where you can excel in one and still not be necessarily good in another.
It's also possible for them to be cool human beings and not perfect and not top 1% at their job.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Right. And I'd also say that the extension of that is, unless a guy is really well known, you really only see him in press conference settings. Like a good example is, if you only saw Andy Reid at press conferences, you would not think that he was necessarily a great hang. Now, now the press conferences are more fun now because he won the Super Bowl, and he's saying stuff like, I can get a cheeseburger with
cheeseburger this,
kind
cheeseburger
of thing.
that.
Yeah. But when he's just at the podium, he seems like a pretty middle-of-the-road coach. You don't see that personality. And so I think that and we're seeing this with Joe Judge now, where I think some guys have just either don't want to give up anything to the media, or they just don't want to take the time. And I've talked to coaches who have said, if I start giving them good answers, I'll have to be at a press conference for 45 minutes a day, and then I can't do, special teams work or whatever it is. And so I think that a lot of times the press conference stuff bleeds over into everyone's evaluation, both as a person and also if we see them on the podium, like, oh, how can you connect with players? Well, that's completely different skill sets.
Yeah. That makes sense. We're going to talk about some of these coaches, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a massive run through the entire league, look at all of their win totals, and tell you whether we would go over or under, and we'll save the mustache bit for the end. I'll keep it under 3. And we're going to start with the NFC East and the Dallas Cowboys, where their win total is at 9.5. We're going to go around the horn, no supporting arguments until we've gone all the way around. And we'll start with you, Kevin. 9.5, over or under?
Over.
Eric?
Over.
I am going under.
All right.
You're getting a good price. Plus 125.
I'm getting kind of a good price. I actually switched this at the last minute. So I'll let you, Kev, start off with you're buying into the hype on the Cowboys.
I'm buying into the roster hype. The coaching stuff is a little bit separate. I like the continuity aspect with Kellen Moore. I think that if they had not had that carry over from one year to the next, I'd be a little more suspicious. But on offense, they sort of have that. And I think that's important. I'm suspicious of anything new this year. I talked to Rick Spielman last week, and we were talking about, having, even though they had a huge kind of turnover with Stephon Diggs, Everson Griffin, a lot of that guy, but they had so many second contract guys. And in this year, you can have, not only with coaching, you have the carryover, but if you have veterans, those veterans can get the young guys up to speed who know the system really, really quickly. And I just think that a team like the Cowboys, that argument tracks for me. I just think Mike McCarthy's newness will be overcome by the fact that they've got a lot of veterans in that team, a lot of either second contract guys or late in the first contract guys. I think that the roster plus that brand of continuity can work. Okay.
Before you answer, Eric, because we've talked about the Cowboys a ton.
Too much.
Huge Mike McCarthy fans. He came, visited the office, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
Get it. We get it. And there's a lot of teams, the Cardinals, the Browns last year, the Rams a few years ago, where it's like, hey, you're a year early. And I don't know why we aren't necessarily a year early on the Cowboys. And I just, our projections have them at getting past 9.5 wins about 35% of the time. And I get the whole continuity thing. I do. But I think this might be the team we're a year early on, and 9-7, not terrible.
I disagree only because I think that we were a year early on Dallas for the last 6 years. So, we're finally to a point where the things come together. When you look at that division, okay, Washington, New York Giants are gonna I'm meh on Washington, but I outwardly think the Giants are gonna suck. I have a strong opinion on the Giants. Philadelphia as a team, they're lined at 9.5 as well. I think the under is, but you lose left tackle, you lose right guard and Brandon Brooks, you lose Jalen Reagor, who wasn't proven to begin with. People are assuming that he was going to be this deep threat already. Your defense lost its best player, Malcolm Jenkins.
Oh, come on. What?
Malcolm Jenkins is their most versatile player, at least. Let's put it that way.
I almost had a heart attack.
And they already aren't very good covering people to begin with, right?
That's totally true.
Dallas, what do they go in the NFC East? 5-1?
Okay. Here's my comeback to that. I'm curious your take, Kevin. The Cowboys, to me, when they should win, that's when I'm most worried. And at first I was like, okay, the Eagles, it's the same old thing, are all injured. I get, but now the Cowboys have no excuses. They've got to come out and perform. They have to win this
But what was
division.
the variable when that was true?
What do you mean? Last year?
Yeah, their head coach was Jason Garrett.
Yeah, that was going to be my rebuttal.
You're going to put it all on Garrett?
I'm not.
Yeah, I kind of.
Garrett struggled at basic strategy, perpetually.
Okay.
They're good at. Go ahead.
The sort of Rosetta Stone of Jason Garrett is that I remember someone saying, like Cowboys beat writer, basically, he believes in execution more than scheme, and maybe to an extreme degree. And I kind of think in the latter half of this decade, if you believed in those things, you would probably fail. And I just don't think Jason Garrett was the type of coach who can beat teams he wasn't supposed to beat, because he did not give them, this is a Charlie Weiss joke, a decided schematic advantage. He did not give them that ever, and that became a problem.
The only playoff game that they've won over in the Garrett era was when Seattle played basic strategy worse than they did.
I'll never forget that game.
And Kevin's absolutely right. I mean, we heard this anecdote as well from somebody who we know within the league that said, you need to be running this, and this. And Garrett's response was, no, we play Cowboy football. We're the Cowboys. This is what we do. And it's like, and we heard that from Kitchens as well. Freddie Kitchens, when he was in Cleveland, he said, it's not my job to out scheme somebody. It's their job to outperform them. And it's like the league is the talent disparity.
Actually, that's literally your job.
The talent disparity in the league is too narrow to have that viewpoint.
Yep. Also I'm very worried about the loss of Byron Jones. Let's move to the Eagles. So Eric, you are going under on them. It's 9.5. It is juiced towards the under for obvious reasons. Kevin?
I hate it, and I wish I didn't have to pick. I wish I could just cop out. I'm going under, but I want to have the caveat. I did over-unders for some teams on my podcast a couple weeks ago with actually Shil Kapadia, who covers the Eagles more than any other team. And I went over because I felt good about their infrastructure, and I thought they could overcome the loss of Brandon Brooks. Now you've got Andre Dillard, who, according to Schefter, was dominating camp. He's out. He wasn't very good last year. He wasn't the type of guy who, if they lost last year, I would have swung my prediction on. Zach Berman said the other day that they were practicing without the top pick in the last 5 drafts, and at some point that catches up to you. My despair over their injuries is an endorsement of the team I think they put together. And I think they're a 9-win team right now. And I'd love to be proven wrong because I love picking the Eagles to win the Super Bowl, but I don't see it right now. I think it's 10 or 11 wins for Dallas, 9 wins for Philadelphia right now.
I'm going under, and I would have gone under before. It seems to me now, I'm curious, is it the Dillard injury or the Rager injury? One of the two? Did both of them have to happen for you to go under?
I would say, I didn't love the Brandon Brooks injury.
Yeah.
Or you guys at Pro Football Focus love.
Yeah, he's great.
And then they get the Jason Peters thing in. I feel like, maybe they've solved some of that. Now you have another hole that Peters is going to have to plug. And it's a little bit of both. And I also think that the Rager thing, listen, the Dallas Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb, and they've got that kind of X factor where if he performs, good things are going to happen. The Eagles had that with Rager. If that gets delayed, that's a tiebreaker in my opinion. So it's all of them. By the way, I forgot that I was only supposed to say over or under.
It's okay.
We like this. This is great.
Okay.
My thing with the Eagles,
I just flagrantly violated the rules of the pod in the second question.
The good news is we can't all be at the same table right now, and so I can't admonish you.
You can't stare daggers into your face.
Last time we were together, you guys just gave me a T-shirt and we had a great time.
It was great,
it was
and
awesome.
you jinxed my team out of the Super Bowl.
You compared. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You compared the Chiefs to, I can't remember which band, but you compared the Chiefs to basically a band where they let one of the musicians star every time. Can't remember which one.
Oh, Metallica.
Yeah.
Metallica.
Yeah.
Yeah. Only because I once went to a Metallica concert with Robert Mays and I saw that. I'm not even a Metallica fan. I just saw that that's what they do at their concert. It's like, now it's time for Lars.
Yeah. Here's the thing with the Eagles that's interesting. They have a reputation for being sharp, and I think they've earned it in a lot of ways. They're very good with the salary cap. They're very good at basic strategy. They go for the right 4th downs. They go for the right 2-point conversions. But Doug Peterson, early down play selection is one of his weaknesses. And I think that gets magnified whenever they have issues at the receiver position because they cannot stretch the field the way they did in 2017 when Carson Wentz was the best 3rd down thrower in the league. So my thing is for them to improve, and it doesn't look like it's trending this way, right? They've been talking Miles Sanders up for months. Yeah. I don't see them being a team that's all of a sudden going to avoid third down altogether, which is the right way to approach early downs. I think they're going to try to run Miles Sanders, and I think Wentz is going to be in long yardage situations, and they're not going to have the horses to get out of them.
Yeah, I'd also be concerned certainly with Wentz, and that offensive line was awesome. They weren't good. They were awesome. They were our number one offensive line last year, and that was with Jason Peters not being his normal fantastic self. So if that takes if they all of a sudden become, I'm trying to think about a good comparison here. Think about like the Rams going from, awesome to really not awesome and bad in a year. Now, Carson Wentz is not Jared Goff. He's much more mobile, but we've seen that hits on him have not done great things. So that they just have, to me, a lot more ways that they can win 9 or fewer than ways that they can win 10 or more. Washington. The Washington football team, 5.5 wins. Interestingly, juiced towards the under. They just named Dwayne Haskins officially the week 1 starter. Kevin, over or under?
I'm going under. I think that this is, I saw that it was one of the Washington reporters basically said that no media access or limited media access actually works in favor of this team because they're not going to be asked about the tire fire every single day. And if they do, the team's going to put out players who can kind of be spokespeople for the team. So you avoid that quote unquote, huge quote marks, distraction. But obviously what's happening outside the locker room right now is a complete disaster. And Snyder is a non-zero chance he loses his team. And, it's a disaster. So I just think that at some point, the lack of roster talent, I really like Chase Young, but we know, impact of a defensive player, it can be limited in a weak link type of system. I really like Ron Rivera. I think eventually this team will be where it needs to be. I just think that this has real disaster potential this year.
At that price, I'm inclined to go over 5.5.
Yes, I am going over, and this was one that I either put in my notes a U, an O, or 2 U's or 2 O's. And the 2 U's or 2 O's was like, I'm investing in this decision.
We're going to go drive over to Indiana and go bet it. Yeah.
And I've got an ooh next to the Washington football team. And my reasoning is actually kind of similar to yours, Kevin, but the reverse, which is they were not just a tire fire, they were a city on fire. Like they were inundated with lava last year. Like nothing worked. And Dwayne Haskins, I thought, overcame that and overcame adversity nicely. I think that Terry McLaurin, who was one of the 3 highest graded rookies that we've had in the past 15 years, gives them a legit offensive weapon that, the Eagles don't even have, the Giants don't even have. And to me, Ron Rivera, whether he's able to be on the field, hopefully he is, gives them a culture stability that is not just going from average to stable, but going from literal disaster to stable.
Yeah, Haskins had some pretty good data at the end of the year a season ago. I'll just take a look at the schedule here, which you go home to Eagles, which last season they had the Eagles down 17-0, I think, early. You have Cardinals, Browns, which I think both teams we think will improve. You have Ravens, but then you have the Giants twice early, Lions, Bengals. Then you have Panthers on the schedule. There's enough there, I think, to get you over the hump. And especially if Haskins plays, let's say Haskins a middle of the pack quarterback, like now you're starting to get in that conversation where like they've been swept by these NFC East teams like every year, like for like forever. If you take 2 or 3 of those NFC East games, besides the Giants games, this is not a high bar to clear.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the Giants because I think this is an interesting comparison. 6.5. Juiced heavily towards the under, not surprisingly.
Same price, basically.
Yeah, basically the same price. So let's call it 5.5 similarly for the Giants. Kevin, what are you doing?
I think this is a 5-win team. And I think that the Joe Judge narrative is getting a little bit away from him outside the building. Coaches running laps and being ultra serious and the jerseys, not talking about players or whatever specifically because they need to earn that. I'm not even sure what that was. But I think that, again, that's a different skill set from are you going to put players in position to win. So I think that there's probably some potential there, but I don't think it's easy. I think it looks to me like Joe Judge is trying to build a culture. I think that's really hard to do right now. And I think that's really – you need more than 14 padded practice for that. I think it's kind of a wash year.
Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think the perception out of a season ago is that Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than Haskins. And while I think that there's certainly data to support that, I don't think the margin is as big as what people are saying. And we all know the Belichick tree is one that's not particularly impressive. I think they all choose to mimic the bad things about Belichick as opposed to like what the secret sauce really is, which is the fact that he's been working, he's had a process for 30 years, since his Browns years, basically. Their defense, although Logan Ryan helps, I think their defense is going to be horrible. Offensive line, not great either. And they have a much harder schedule than Washington does. I think if you look at, if one of the best props of the year is you can get Washington winning more games than the Giants, I think I'd take it.
Yes, I'm with you. And my whole thing with the Judge situation is, you brought up a good point, which is when McDaniels went to Denver, it was like he tried to be Belichick. And really what Belichick does is be himself better than anyone else. And that's what these guys got to do. I would argue that if you're trying to establish a culture and you end up in the news repeatedly for the culture you're establishing, you don't have the foresight necessary to think that one through. I would take Dwayne Haskins over Daniel Jones at this point in their careers without a ton of thought. And Kevin, what would you do there?
I need more data.
Yeah, but you don't.
Quite frankly, maybe you guys can help with that. If I can't have it, if I had to pick right now for the next 10 years.
It's like you'd like to decide whether you're keeping the mustache for life or not, but you need more data.
It's in. It's locked in. Do I think Daniel Jones or Dwayne Haskins? For this year, I'm gonna choose. I think we're gonna think after this year that Haskins is the more promising quarterback. I think that. Listen, Daniel Jones actually has, he's going to have a good safety valve in Saquon, and they can make his life easier in some ways. But again, Jason Garrett, Freddie Kitchens on the offensive staff. I'm not totally excited about it. That to me, it's kind of 1A and 1B. I'm going to guess Haskins is more well thought of at the end of the season.
Some things about Daniel Jones that I think are interesting is that touchdown to interception ratio is often cited as like this stat that we should look into, and he threw so many touchdowns. It's like the dude led the league in interceptions that were dropped by defenders from the time that he took over to the end of the season. Those things just don't show up on your box score, and it's like that matters. Like if half of those get picked off, a very different.
And here's the funny thing: I think those do show up sometimes, but when you're a team as bad as the Giants have been, or as bad as Washington has been. Like we're long gone past the 4 p.m. Dallas New York game where we watched Trubisky when the Bears were good, and it was clear to anybody that watched those games that the Bears won despite Trubisky. When a team like the Giants or Washington plays under the radar, like we don't watch those games. Like the average public doesn't watch those games. So then when they look up and they're like, "Wow, Daniel Jones had 20-something touchdown passes," they forget that like a third of those were in 3 games or whatever it was. And when people are like, oh, Washington, they're losing 34-20, it's like, well, actually Haskins played well. There was a bunch of drops in there, and it's like, those are magnified for the important teams. And when we're trying to evaluate and handicap these kind of also ran below 6-win teams year to year, like that's where the data I think is even more valuable.
All right, so we're moving on to the AFC West, which I think is a slightly less interesting division, in large part because the Chiefs are really, really freaking good. Their win total, 11.5, juice towards the over. And we're going to reestablish the cadence here. Over or under? Kevin?
Over.
Eric?
Under.
Of course. Of course, the reverse jinx is alive. I'm going over, and I'm going to start off with my reasoning, which is they won more than 11.5 games last year, and Matt freaking Moore started some for them. And I will also say this: when Pat Mahomes played, he regressed a little bit. He got injured, right? The ankle injury. If he's just a little bit healthier, it easily go over.
Andy Reid, in his career as the Kansas City head coach, has never gone under a season win total.
That's a trend. That's a trend that I like to follow.
But I will say the plus 115 is what really, that's what I'm looking at. And we just don't know with COVID. We just don't know with injuries. And they are, if you look at their first 4 weeks without Rashad Breeland and without, with Thornhill coming back from an injury, like they face a pretty tough schedule early. You have Houston, Baltimore. It's not going to be easy for them to get out of the gate. So that's why I'm going under. Obviously, I hope they win more than that. But.
Kevin, did the fact that we have gone through this pandemic, did that in any way sway you over under for the Chiefs? Because it did for me.
Yeah. So the reason it's over for me is I just think that teams that can do things really well and don't need a ton of preparation time to do that stuff, they're going to win this year. And there's going to be a massive gulf between the elite quarterbacks and even the great quarterbacks. Like, I think that you're going to see Lamar and Mahomes and Breeze and those guys have even more of an advantage than they normally would because, the teams are going to want to run complicated systems or run systems against flat-footed defenses. And if they can do that with 14 padded practices, yes, that's a huge advantage. And so I think there's a baseline. I mean, it is hard for me, again, kind of going back to what we've been saying. If Reed and Mahomes are together, I don't care about the 52 other guys unless it's a total tire fire. So I think that there's always going to be a baseline of competence there. So I think with the talented roster they have, I'm in for 12 to 14 wins.
Yes. I'm not going to go 16. I'm not going to go coward on you guys. Don't worry.
They're favored in all but one game, I think, this year. Or two.
Well, 15-1. That's not bad. That still gets you over. In large part, so I think about the pandemic. I echo your statement about that, Kevin. That played in. But also looking at the rest of the division, which, speaking of tire fire, and let's start with, I don't know which one's the biggest one. Let's make people angry. The Denver Broncos. I'm not saying they're the biggest one, but 7.5. Pretty even on both sides. Kevin, over under.
7 wins for me, so under.
Eric?
I'm sorry. I
got you. I snuck in there.
Oh my god. It's like Simon says. I just keep explaining myself. Under.
Over.
Okay, I'm going under. Explain yourself, Eric.
I think that I almost said Chicago Bears team. This Denver team is going to be the next in a line of teams with crappy young quarterbacks that we're going to have fan bases messing with us all off season because we're going to say, look, the stars were aligned. Drew Lock played. He was a 4 out of 10, and everything else came into place, and you won 10 games and you made the playoffs. Blah blah blah. Like that to me, like I see it. I think on offense they have a ton of weapons. They have the two young tight ends. They have Judy. They have Hamler if he's healthy. They have Cortland Sutton, who's one of the best young receivers in the game. Pat Shurmur's a good offensive coordinator, I think. I don't think he's a great head coach, but he's a good offensive coordinator. And then on defense, they have lost some players, but they've also, they have Jarrell Casey. They have, the head coach is a pretty good defensive play caller. So when I look at that, this is a huge part of fade on the Chargers and the Raiders, but this is the one team that I think like they make the playoffs, and then next year we're all betting under 9.5.
Yeah, Kevin.
I think that Broncos fans in some ways have done Drew Lock a disservice by grading him on this particular curve, and I don't know why we're trying to get him into the top young quarterbacks discussion.
The Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is where we're trying to get him.
When I think that he has shown markings of a good young quarterback who might be a couple of years away from really being something. I just don't see that this year. I really do. I know that it's funny to dunk on him, but I actually think Elway made some solid moves this offseason. Like the Jarrell Casey move is a pretty good value move. So I don't think they're going to be a disaster, which I think a couple of years ago they looked like they were trending towards that. But I think with Fangio, they still have talent like Von Miller. I think there's a baseline here, but I think it's seven wins.
Yeah, my whole thing with it, and I'm with you. I would say 7 and 9. Like I would be kind of pleased with that, to be honest with you. There's so much projection here, and I am really worried about the secondary. Chris Harris Jr. is really freaking good. Over the last decade, I believe he's number 2 in PFF grade behind only Richard Sherman. Super versatile piece. And then you're asking Drew Lock after 5 games, and I go on a Denver radio station every Wednesday, and it's a really fun segment, and every time there's some Drew Lock thing, and they have cited touchdown interception ratio 100 times. It was 5-2, I think.
How bad?
5-2.
How bad are you to be 5-2 and still have a passer rating below 90? By the way, you must suck. But but don't you guys agree though that of the teams with young quarterbacks, where like I don't see Washington winning 10 games, I see them winning 6 or 7. I don't see the Giants winning 10 games, I see them winning 4. I don't, of all the quarterbacks that are young, I don't really see, like I could see Arizona maybe, like, popping up. But if Arizona pops up and wins a bunch of games, I don't think our response to that is going to be, but Kyler Murray stinks. Like he's going to have to be good for them to be good. I feel like Denver's the team where they could have some random, not easy schedule. I mean, in their first few weeks they have home to Titans, Dolphins, a weaker Patriots team, and Jets. Like they could get off to a good start, and then everybody's writing about how John Elway's turned the corner.
Remember, they took the Super Bowl contending Bears to the limit last year in week 2 and almost beat them. It was 14-16. Trubisky dunked on all of us with putting 16 points up. So maybe there's a little bit of Broncos hype early if they have another performance like that against some juggernaut teams that the NFL will throw at them. I think that with Locke, I start to think, and you made the point about Jones and Haskins, and I kind of feel like we're getting spoiled a little bit with some of these young quarterbacks coming in and having immediate success, and us knowing kind of what the pecking order is, because Mike Sando was on my podcast last week, and I know you guys know him, but I don't think we've solved. Lamar Jackson is the best 2018 quarterback. I don't think we've solved who the second best is, and we might not ever. I mean, it's like we're still arguing about 2016 with Goff, Wentz, and Prescott, and I just kind of feel like there were a handful of unicorns over the past few years: Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, and they established themselves, and we kind of know where that pecking order is. But I think that when you get into sort of the B+ to C- quarterbacks, it's really hard for any of those guys to reveal themselves, and I wish we framed the argument differently.
The unicorns. I remember reading a headline that was like, Drew Lock, is he the next Patrick Mahomes? It wasn't that blazing, but it was pretty damn close. And
then the funny thing is the Broncos actually got a really good value for him when they picked him.
Yeah, because they picked 2 players for him. Yeah. All right, Raiders 7.5. The under is juiced a little bit here. I'll start it off. I am going under. Kevin.
I'm going over.
Eric.
This is one of the ones I wrote up early in the offseason. I will go under 7.5.
I'll start here quickly. I struggled with this quite a bit. And the reason I did was that their offense last year, top 10 in EPA per play. And as much as I but don't like the way Derek Carr plays football, I had to pay some respect to that. Kevin, why are you going over?
I'm with you on the offense. I think that John Gruden, to me, is in the Bill O'Brien zone, where his mistakes when he was a franchise leader pre-Mayock have shadowed our opinions of him as a coach. I think he's still a pretty good coach. I think that even if you have the Marcus Mariota shadow and that John Gruden wants to pull the trigger on a quarterback change whenever that seems possible. So I think that there's a little bit of concern with me there, but I think Derek Carr is okay. I think they can get to 8 wins. I kind of like the way they're building this team. I kind of think that Mike Mayock is a really good GM.
Wow. How many people, what if you did a approval poll on Mike Mayock on football Twitter, what do you think he would get?
On football Twitter, like 45%, but among Raiders fans, that's like 87%.
Yeah. I don't.
Cleveland Farrell looks like a surefire.
I don't hate your take. My issue there is, and again, we had this discussion with Aaron Nagler. the other day. The Raiders were a 7-9 team last year, but all of their wins were by one score or more, or one score or fewer. They're more fundamentally a 4.5 win team. So to get them over 7.5, you're talking about a fundamental 3-win improvement, which I just don't see. They just traded for the Raekwon McMillan. They got actually a good player in Corey Littleton at linebacker, the guy from the Bears. They got 3 linebackers, acquired recently. Meanwhile, their secondary sucks, and they just got rid of Prince Amukamara for a rookie who's older than George. And now, and I look, and again, this is like where I sort of break the tie. If you look at their schedule, they're at Panthers, Saints, Patriots, Bills, Chiefs, Bucks, Browns. I mean, that's 5 losses, 6 losses in a row. And then you have at Chargers, Broncos, then you have Chiefs again. And then it does slow up at the end of the year, but they might be buried going to Mariota mid-season, or by the time it's all said and done, and that might be their only hope.
Yeah, I think Mariota gets some starts.
But and here's the question I have, and Kevin, is Mariota good? Because Mariota's the most frustrating quarterback I've ever seen in my life. The only time he's ever played well is to beat my Chiefs in the playoffs 2 years ago. That's it. Every other time he's been sacked 9 times, it feels like.
I like the idea of Marcus Mariota far more than an actual player. And I think that there's a zone and there's a timeline where he has an incredibly successful career where he's not given to Ken Wisenhunt and Mike Mularkey, and then he gets someone who knows how to use him and knows how to run the spread. And that unfortunately is not the timeline we're living in. And it's one of the things that bummed me out about the last decade of football more than anything is how he's been handled. But I do think he's maybe too far gone.
I would agree there, especially because we see a lot of players that we end up rooting for who are good football players and not great people. And Marcus Mariota seems to be like one of the good dudes that is out there, and it's a shame. But maybe a little rebirth. Will Tannehill, doing the same thing now that he goes to another team, he gets a second chance. Yep. Tannehill had a terrible situation in Miami.
Carr was very good in the first half of last season, like legitimately a top 5 player at the position. And it trailed off at the end. I do think
fumbled that one out of the end zone.
Dude, is there anything you like to do more than Derek Carr likes fumbling the ball out of the back of the end zone for a touchback? Like, honestly, I don't.
All right.
I want to address Carr real quick. Because one thing this is total pseudoscience, but I was very impressed by it. I was at the last game at the Coliseum.
It's my favorite science.
In Oakland. And I was on the field after the game, and I was looking at the black hole was kind of giving its last goodbyes to Oakland, and they lost to the Jaguars. They just completely, I think they'd given the game away. They were up, I don't know, a handful of scores, and they were like throwing things at the players and stuff. And Derek Carr started to get booed when he went over to the black hole, and then he kept going, and the boos kept getting louder, and he just wanted to say his goodbyes. And they were just so vicious, and they were throwing things, and they were, kids were giving the middle finger or whatever. And after the game, they were like, "Why did you do that when you knew you were going to get booed?" And he's like, "Yeah, I get booed a lot. It's fine." And like the confidence that he showed in that moment was kind of badass. And I've actually kind of changed my opinion on Derek Carr from that. Just going into a side of the stadium that he knew he was going to get booed in. He wanted to be quote unquote classy, and he was totally fine with what was coming. It was a different side than I was anticipating.
Kevin, how does Kirk Cousins handle that situation?
Not well.
Okay.
No, I'll say that. I'm going back to the format. I'm going back to the format of not following up with anything.
I sort of feel like he either handles it like he handles pressure, which is just to close his eyes and throw it, in which case that's kind of how Carr did act. I mean, but at least Carr sort of like knew what he was doing when he was going through the gauntlet.
Kirk Cousins walking into the black hole is a if he dies, he dies situation. Chargers are 7.5, line 7.5. The under, this tells you where I'm going. It is juiced towards the over, and I'll start with this. I have multiple U's. I'm all in on the under. Kevin.
Yeah, me too.
Yep. And
Under.
Eric.
Yeah, and you can get this at 8 some places just if you want some extra betting advice. But like, I'm thinking when I look at this team as far as 7.5 wins, we have them as one of the more likely teams to get the number 1 pick. And I think to myself there, when it's like, defense is where they want to win. They just lost one of their biggest pieces. We don't know necessarily how Chris Harris will adjust. They do rush the passer pretty well, although Melvin Ingram's getting older, as evidenced by the fact that they waited forever to give him the money. And then on the offensive side of the ball, like, I can't see Herbert having the type of success that Baker Mayfield did when he replaced Tyrod Taylor halfway through a season. So this team could win 10 games. We're all sitting back and be like, oh, why did we doubt Tyrod Taylor again? Why did we doubt good defense again? But when I think of this team, I think of a team that's like a classic, like, rebuild, reload season.
Kevin.
I don't think that there's a huge distinction between any of the three teams in the AFC West.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is when you don't have a good quarterback or a great quarterback, however, what's not going to Taylor at the moment, but they don't have a quarterback who solves problems for them, I don't think. And when you have that, you have to get a break in every single direction. And the Chargers have not never gotten a break, they have already hugely suffered by having Derwin James out for the entire year. And we tend to overrate what one defender can do.
Yep.
But Derwin James changes the way they play. And so I'm not feeling it. They'd have to there's 1,000 things that have to go right for Taylor to make the playoffs. And I just don't think that is happening.
We are aligned, and we move on to another interesting division, the NFC South. We're going to start with the New Orleans Saints. Been in the news a little bit lately. They are lined 10.5 and a little bit juiced towards the over, which I'm interested how many people went rushing to bet the under with the Kamara news. Kevin, over under.
This is the one where I might change my answer in the middle of the sentence. Under.
Eric?
Damn it. The math says under, so let's go under.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am joining you guys under, and this was one where I really, really struggled because I thought to myself, man, Emmanuel Sanders comes over to that offense. They have a great offensive line, and something just didn't feel right about them winning 11 games. Kevin?
Yeah, same deal. There are 4 teams who are designated as winning double-digit games by Vegas in the over-under. That is the Niners, the Saints, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. And I think the Saints are, by a sizable margin, the worst of those 4 teams. That's still being quite good. They're still going to make the playoffs, but I just don't put them necessarily. I think that the Super Bowl is going to be Ravens against the Niners, and I think the Chiefs are right there. I think that it's extremely possible the Saints will be in the NFC Championship game, but if I had to bet, they feel like they could be a 10-win team. You have the Bucs in the division now. You have the Falcons, who I think can be okay. I liked being on the edge there with between 10 and 11 wins, and I'm just going to go with the under because, like Eric says, the math backs it up.
Yep. What is your feeling on Drew Brees? Because he continually grades super well for us. He doesn't throw the ball downfield a ton, and he's had these last couple of seasons where, down the stretch, it's been ugly, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So, like you guys have been writing about for kind of a while now, he does not look downfield at all. He has made the short field it's been a masterclass in how to control the field without using it all. And Michael Thomas is, despite what some analytic people say, I think hugely valuable. And I think that Alvin Kamara can be very, very, very valuable for this team. If he's, I don't know if his reports are he's in the building and his hold-in sort of continues. I don't know what the status of that is. But if they're at full strength, I think that Breeze kind of Kamara, Thomas, that sort of Peyton offense can roll on. I do think, listen, he's going to be 41 this year. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And 41 in January, and presumably he'll still be playing. And I just think at some point, I think we've gotten a little too comfortable assuming these players are going to play forever. And Kevin Cole has done great research on how these players fall off a cliff at some point. And I think you can see a nice regular season and maybe a bad playoff, something like that, where I'm getting less and less comfortable saying a 41-year-old is going to be as efficient as he always has.
I am of the mind that next year at this time we'll be hyping up the Jameis Winston-led Saints.
I think so. I mean, that's the part of that's why when you look at, if you actually don't have any information about the NFL and you add up all the probabilities for all these markets, if you just blindly bet unders, you'd make money, because we almost always, to Kevin's point, underestimate the risk of bad things happening. Mm-hmm. There's only so many good things that can happen for all these teams, but there's almost an infinite number of bad things that can happen. And the one that we almost never...
And it's 2020, so...
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I like the under, in the sense, like, Breeze could play really well, and the NFC West, or sorry, the NFC South could be game. Like, Bridgewater could be better than we think. Obviously our Falcons could.
He literally can't be better than you think.
and Tampa Bay could be have a fighting chance, obviously, now with Brady. So that's kind of I think why it's supporting the under there.
All right, let's go to the Bucks. 9.5. We'll start with you, Kevin.
Same fence that I'm on with the Bucks, or excuse me, the Saints I'm on with the Bucks. I'm going to go over.
Eric?
Man, same reason I'm going under for the Saints. I'm going under for Tampa,
and I'm going over. And I struggled with this one because when you look at our simulations, the under looks like a nice play, and I wouldn't actually bet this one because it's so juiced towards the over. People love the over, but it's one of those situations where if there are two older quarterbacks, and I'm looking at Breeze and Brady, I just have so much more faith in Tom Brady. I think he had literally one of the worst possible supporting casts last year, and I don't think he's done. And that supporting cast in Tampa Bay is incredible. And I believe that he can still throw the ball down the field a little bit, especially in the intermediate levels. So to me, the Bucks are a 10-win team, so I'm going over. Your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a significant, downgrade. I think there's a significant chance that Brady, what we saw last season with the Patriots, is fundamentally true about Brady. There's a bunch. Our fantasy projections don't seem to think so, right? You put him in that situation, we have him throwing for a ton of yards, but there's a lot of tail risk with Brady. There's obviously the chance he could get hurt at that age. The most I believe like the most passes a 43-year-old has ever thrown is by Vinny Testaverde for the Panthers. Like, we just have no precedent for this. So, I like them, and I think halfway through the year we could be like, God damn, they're like 10-2. Why didn't we see this coming? But there's a significant portion of time where, like, who are we kidding with Brady here? Like, he's in an offense that's totally different than normal. Their defense regressed. Because last season was really the year their defense played well. Like, all that kind of stuff. Again, I think that's why the under's sharp on a lot of these.
It is ludicrous, our expectations. And it speaks to how good Brady is. He's 43 years old, and we're considering actual, like, football reasons for why he can be good, and not just like magic and superstition or whatever it is that's actually happening. I do think it's funny, Eric, to your point, that whenever I look up records for Tom Brady, like age-related records, he's only competing against Warren Moon and Vinny Testaverde. Like, that's it. That's the list. And like guys from the 40s and 50s. I think that I think the supporting cast to me is really important. I think that the offense is really important, and how he fits in Arians' offense, I think, is a separate conversation. But I think that they can make it work with Gronk and Mike Evans, and I think he's going to have some nice safety valves if he loses some arm strength or whatever it is, and more than he has. I mean, again, he's not in the breeze zone where he doesn't even look downfield, but he's not Patrick Mahomes anymore. And so I think that they can make this work. I like the Bucs roster. I think he's a playoff team.
And I will say this, Tom Brady doesn't have to be a top 5 quarterback for this. This team is really good around him. And my thought on him now is you're an offense that receivers have to get open. he's not, and we're talking about, with the Patriots and Cam Newton, what he brings, that was a dimension that Tom Brady did not have. Guys had to get open for his accurate passes to be worth something, because tight coverage just drops your expected yards output by half. It's simple math. So to me, now he has all these guys that are getting open all the time. Like it just, I don't know, it's like flipping a switch. I expect it to look pretty good. The moment I've been waiting for is the Atlanta Falcons. This is where my year goes south every single season. And I'm ready for it. 7.5. People appear to be betting the over a little bit. Kevin, over under the Falcons.
Over. Yeah, we'll keep going. Eric?
Join me. Welcome to hell, Kevin. You have no choice.
Yeah, over.
Talk to me.
They were 6-2 down the stretch last year. I like the heart that they show. They do have a tough schedule out the gate, though. Seattle, Dallas, Packers, Vikings in the first 6 weeks.
What's your biggest reason for continuing to have faith in the Falcons despite them being the Falcons, Kevin?
I think that they have a number of talented players who have either been injured or been wrecked by bad play calling, or maybe that they did, I think Kyle Shanahan showed us what this offense was capable of. And they've been trying to recapture that, and they've quite frankly failed miserably. And I think that there's still the things we saw in that season are guidepost, and I feel like every year they get maybe closer to it. And I still think Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, a handful of those guys are on this level where if they get a bunch of breaks and have good play calling, frankly, we've seen they can win an MVP. I think Stafford's on that level too, and I think one day he might. I think that their injury luck has been awful, maybe not in totality, but with some of their stars or second contract guys. And I also just think, and this is something I keep coming back to the entire season, is this is an Occam's razor simple season. And if you have Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, and you can run plays that are complicated against flat-footed defenses, that's what you want to do. And I feel like they'll be able to score points pretty easily. It's almost going to become, I know we say this all the time, but it's almost going to become basketball on grass. And who would you rather have than Matt Ryan and Julio Jones? I
would make the claim, and I think I talked about this and got ruined for it on Twitter, but if I said this team has the best quarterback and receiver in the division, can they win 8 games? People go, oh yeah, for sure. And I would say that about Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. I know the quarterbacks are very close, very, very close. Matt Ryan is a good quarterback who's been saddled with some very unfortunate situations, in my opinion. And I think it's close. I'm not saying, like I'm for sure taking Matt Ryan just by a mile, but I would go with him and Julio over any of the other duos.
Do they have the depth in the secondary to withstand what is, generally speaking, always like the problem is they're very fragile on defense. They always have been, and they've played in a division where teams can take advantage of that all the time. And I like the AJ Terrell pick. I like Keanu Neal as a concept, but I've never seen him actually on the field. Deion Jones is terrific, but again, hurt a decent amount.
The distant memory and concept of him still lives on.
And Grady Jarrett's awesome. Like one of the best interior players in all of the game. So like if things go well, yeah, DeMonte Casey's awesome too. But like
Calvin Ridley,
I'm sorry, but if Keanu Neal is on the active roster after week 3, I'll buy you a steak, George. I'm a little worried about that because there is no other division that could take advantage of that more than the NFC South.
As long as it's not a steak in Indianapolis where they refuse to cook things.
The Falcons, to me, it's like the old line, like life is what happens when you're making other plans. Like the Falcons are constructed with a bunch of good ideas. And then, like you said, Deion Jones, Keanu Neal, all of these guys, life happens and then they get sidetracked. I do think Dirk Cutter, Dan Quinn, they've talked about getting back to the play action, adapting the run game a little bit. I just think there's a path forward for this team. And I cannot believe we're all so in. This seems like a bad sign.
It's a terrible sign, but if there were 2 other people that I had to ride on the sleigh straight down into hell with, this would be the group. So welcome. Panthers, 5.5. Some people apparently buying into Matt Rule over a little bit juiced. Kevin, 5.5.
I'm going under. I like Matt Rule. I like some other pieces, but no.
Eric? I know this is tough for you. I understand. I can see the pain on your face.
Yeah. I think they'll go over, and it won't be good for them.
The only Minnesota Vikings thing that Eric will outwardly cheer for is the concept of Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, that's like Teddy Bridgewater is like the same thing as Keanu Neal. It's like is an idea that's never actually materialized before.
Yeah, I've got the Panthers are my team that will be picking Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields next year.
I don't like. So I get what you're saying, but I look at their draft and their offseason, and of the two teams that I think are tank and the 1995 expansion teams, those are the two teams that are going to be the worst teams in football this year. Fundamentally, the Jaguars have embraced the suck so much better. All their draft players are boom bust guys, right? Their quarterback's a boom bust guy. Their coach is like the sittingest duck I've ever seen in my life.
I like Doug Marrone.
And the Panthers are the exact opposite. The Panthers are built to win 6 games. They're built to win 6 games. Bridgewater gets you on the green.
He does?
Yes, he does.
Because my retort to that, and I'll let Kevin break the tie, my retort to that is the New Orleans Saints and Sean Payton is one hell of an offense and an offensive system. So good, in fact, that they make Drew Brees look really good. And Teddy Bridgewater is a
who coached with Bridgewater in New Orleans his first year?
Oh, stop it!
Oh wow!
Stop it!
Wow!
Look, their draft was a bunch of no variance players. Derek Brown.
You could have just stopped before variance.
Yeah, they drafted 7 defensive players. Their goal is to not get run out of the building in every single game. Like the Jaguars said,
support me, Kevin.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. Here's my take on that particular debate: who's going to draft Trevor Lawrence next year. Okay, I feel like the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be okay, just from a coaching standpoint and a player standpoint, with winning like 1 game, maybe 0. Okay. The Carolina Panthers are starting to build a culture. Matt Rule is going to be there for a long time. He signed a long extension. And I think that if they do the thing, you know this every year, if they do this thing where they go on a 3-game winning streak in December, they're going to be fired up about that. Whereas Doug Marrone might have been fired already by December. They're just giving guys looks. They're just churning through the waiver wire, all this stuff. They don't care. I just feel like it's going to be an attitude thing in December where one team is saying, hey, we can build on this, and one team is saying, like, when is vacation?
Matt Rule's going to be spitting up on his art smock, running down the sideline, cheering that 3rd win to get them to 3-10.
Yeah.
Be fantastic.
They're both going to be bad. I think Marrone's Thanksgiving firing is the difference between these two.
Man. Okay, I'll sit on the Jacksonville Island by myself.
Only Thanksgiving because their early season schedule is not the worst.
I believe in Gardner Minshew. Okay, AFC East. The New England Patriots, this is going to be an interesting one, are at 9. I remember when it came out, I believe it was 9.5, and I ran to bet the under. The under's still a little juiced at 9. Over, under 9 for the Pats, Kevin.
God, 9 is Vegas is so good at their jobs. Under.
Wow.
Under.
All right, I'm going over, and I'll give you my reasoning. Cam Newton is not 2.5 wins worse than Tom Brady, and their win total last year was 11.5. I, in fact, think that Cam Newton brings some things that for that offense can make them a little bit better in ways that Brady hurt them, which was he gave them nothing else other than the quick passing game, given those assets that they had, if you want to call them that, on offense. Cam Newton at least is his own asset aside from the other players with him. So I'm going over.
Individual defensive players don't move the line very much. Collections of them can. And I feel like when you look at Chung, Hightower, Jamie Collins, Danny Shelton, Daron Harmon, and what actually started happening down the stretch last year, which they went from a team that was producing turnovers on like a quarter of their opponent's drives to more like 10-15%. If that even goes down more towards league average, as it tends to do, like I agree with you that Cam is not that much worse than Brady, but I think that I think there are a bunch of interconnected things that can make up this difference. Plus, their schedule's harder.
I think that you're looking at the under because of the 6 opt-outs and just the fact that, I don't know. I mean, I've been trying to play every side of the AFC East debate for all offseason, but I think the Bills have a better roster post opt-out, and I feel like they have just a clearer path, in my opinion. I think less things have to go totally right. And also, Cam Newton's health is still, I mean, until I see it, I'm still a little bit worried about it. I think he's going to be a very, very good player this year, but I want to see him during the football field. So I think 8 seems right post opt-outs, but I still love Bill Belichick. I think he's the best coach of all time.
Let's move on to the Bills because this is an interesting conversation. I would argue very strongly that the New England Patriots, the rest of the roster, okay, maybe the Bills a little bit better. Cam Newton decisively better at quarterback. The Bills win total is also 9. Over or under, Kevin?
Over.
Eric?
Under.
I'm going under as well. So support your boy, Josh Allen.
Josh Allen is not the reason.
Oh.
Is not the reason to pick them. I see Josh Allen, even though he has a higher ceiling on some of his throws or whatever, I see him with a group of quarterbacks where everything has to break right for him to win big, win 11, 12 games, but I actually see that happen. And I actually like the roster there a lot. I like Sean McDermott as both a scheme coach and a culture coach. I think Brian Daboll, keeping him in the fold after last year is important. Stephon Diggs is a great addition. And I just think that they're going to be able to do enough to overcome any mistakes Josh Allen makes. And I also think that there's a case to be made. You guys have written about this. There's not a huge jump from year 2 to year 3 for quarterbacks. It's from year 1 to year 2. Year 2 to year 3 is normally reserved. Maybe other positions have a bigger jump, but quarterback is not one of them. But I think he can get slightly better. And I think that's all they need this year.
Interesting. Yeah. Adam Schefter made the case that he believes he can become a much better quarterback without his accuracy improving. And I mean, I disagree with that, but I think if you are going to buy into it, it is saying, okay, I accept the accuracy isn't there, but unlike Mitch Trubisky, he is a mobile quarterback that we can run 150 times a year, and he does bring the locker room together instead of, turning the TVs off when he has a bad game.
I am a fan of Sean McDermott. I'm a fan of what Buffalo's doing. I think the best thing for them is to win 6 games this year and move on at quarterback so they can be a real good team.
And there you have it. We're moving on to the Miami Dolphins, who are lined at 6.5. And I'll start this one off. I have multiple O's next to my Dolphins at 6.5. Kevin,
are these your Dolphins, being from that area? Which are
every team is my team.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan. They share a stadium. I would not classify myself as a fan of any NFL team.
Gotcha.
But I've definitely. As a fan, I've been to – a fan being used loosely, just as a spectator. I've been to games in all 3 stadiums, although Miami was just when I was in college. When I was a kid, I went to Jaguars games and Bucs games. It's closer, just geographically. They are not my Dolphins. However, in the last couple of weeks, I've been talking myself more into these Dolphins. I'm picking the over.
Eric?
Same.
Yeah. My reasoning for this is last year they had the most valuable quarterback in the entire, according to PFF wins above replacement, in the league, and I don't think that's
division, not league.
Sorry, in the division. That would be incredible. And I don't know that they don't have 2 quarterbacks now that could very, very well be in that conversation. Let's just move on to the Jets, because there are some interesting teams that I want to discuss, and I don't want us to drag too far on with these more boring ones. The New York Jets, 6.5. Really, I want to talk about, which division.
I'm going to go against the math here. I just can't do it. Under.
Okay, Kevin. Jets.
Yeah, me too. I can't. Just the tiebreaker between the two teams is the Dolphins are going to win games they shouldn't. And I don't think the Jets are capable of that.
The Jets have gotten 7 wins, or Gase himself has gotten 7 wins out of 4-win teams for too many years in a row for me to buy into it again. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I would say actually I am. So I think that the race for the first pick is. It's going to be Jets and Panthers. I actually think the Jaguars are better than both those teams, and I'm going under. All right, moving on to the AFC South. The Indianapolis Colts, 9. I'm interested in this one. It is juiced heavily towards the over here. Kevin,
I'm going with that. It's over.
Man, with confidence. Go ahead.
This one's tough because I'm a huge fan of a lot of things on that team. They have continuity except at the most important position though, and I need to see it from Rivers, so I'm going to go under. I'm going under too. So Kevin, talk me into the Colts.
Love this roster. Love the upgrade for Phillip Rivers, both for the Colts and for Phillip Rivers. You know, the thing I keep coming back to, and again, this is a little bit of serious science, but Rich Hornberger, who played with Rivers, was on my podcast a couple months ago. He said that no one is worse in a bad situation than Phillip Rivers because he's so competitive and he tries to force the ball. And that's why we get into these situations where they're down 8 and he throws the worst pass you've ever seen in your life, because he diagnoses the play and says, like, if I don't put the team on my back, this franchise is screwed. And I think you drop him in, good offensive line, good roster, good infrastructure, good offensive head coaches that he's familiar with. I kind of like it. Yeah.
Honestly, for me, the tricky thing was the price on it, and at that price, I'm kind of with Eric. The one thing I will say is that Rivers does something what you mentioned, which is really smart mathematically. It's like, look, my only hope is to do this. I don't care if we lose, but I'm not going to go down. I'm going to die trying, right? Like I'd rather at least try than and just throw caution to the wind than try to avoid interceptions, and help my statistics out. Let's go to the Titans, because I think this is an interesting conversation between the two. They're at 8.5. Kevin, are you over or under on the Titans?
I think 9 sounds right. Over.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, I think over is probably one of my biggest plays so far this season.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. So Kevin, better team. You think the Colts are better than the Titans, and is it close?
I do. It is close. I like Arthur Smith a lot. I think that they've gone 9-7, the last 4 years. It just so happened that they got hot at the right time last year and showed they were capable of scheming up and having the personnel to beat Lamar Jackson. So I think that the hype around them is a little bit out of whack, but I still think that they're a 9-10 win team.
Yeah. But you would go Titans, Colts?
Yeah, I think Titans to win that division is a pretty solid bet. To me, I think the continuity there isn't as vast, but it's in the important places, which is A.J. Brown, Ryan Tannehill, Arthur Smith, and to a lesser degree, but important, is Derrick Henry. Defensively, they got better with Christian Fulton. Logan Ryan is somebody I think they'll miss, but and they need to rush the passer better. But I think offensively, they're still going to be tough to stop. I don't think it's going to be like top 5 team in offense all the way down to 15 and just one regression swoop.
Yeah, and Jeffrey Simmons is a breakout candidate if they want to get a little more push on the defensive line. So I think there's a path there. This division is so hard to call, and we'll talk about that in a second, I'm sure. But this is a very talented division.
Let's go to the Texans, because there are a few players in the league that I like more than Deshaun Watson. They are lined at 7.5. There's definitely some Bill O'Brien GM hatred in this line here. Kevin, over under 7.5 for Deshaun Watson and the Texans.
Over. I don't get it. I don't understand how the GM hate can be this pervasive.
It's bad.
And so I'm going over. I mean, listen, I'm looking at 3 divisions last year where 3 teams won over 8 or more games, the NFC North and the NFC West. And I think you're looking at that with this division this year.
Eric?
Houston over. Houston to make the playoffs at plus 140, 150. O'Brien's not calling the plays, which is one thing to think about is when you handicap this. But they should get better on defense, just but for regression's sake, much in the way Kansas City did last year. I don't think the loss of Hopkins is as big as people are going to say, and it's always fun to root for Deshaun Watson week to week.
We've talked about this a lot, which is there's no like worse feeling than betting against Deshaun Watson, because you're sitting there the whole game and you're like, man, I just had this uneasy feeling he's gonna get kicked in the eye and he's still gonna score a touchdown. The dude just like can't be killed. And as bad as Bill O'Brien, the GM, has been, I actually like some of the things he's done as a head coach and some of the decisions that he's made, on fourth downs.
He's gotten a lot better at that. Yeah, for sure.
And so maybe your point, him not calling the plays even helps in that situation. And I know Sam Monson and I share this take, which is that there's a chance that, Deshaun Watson's biggest bugaboo is he holds onto the ball too long. And not having one receiver that just dominates your mental space, maybe it helps that a little bit. I know all those guys go downfield, but it doesn't take fast receivers that long to get 15 yards downfield. I have multiple O's. I'm all about this one. Yeah. Jaguars, 4.5. This is the lowest line out there. I have.
We already did this.
I have a feeling I know. So Kevin. You are. What are they going? 1-15?
I think they get 2.
They get 2.
I'm going over.
I'm going over. I love this. I think Gardner Minshew is good. I think that Leonard Fournette, the perception is, they're just canning all of their first round picks. Leonard Fournette, though, thinking of him in the same way as like a Jalen Ramsey is ridiculous. Like that doesn't hurt their team at all.
He was a weight around their ankles. I look at their early season schedule. Home to Colts, they'll be underdogs. At Titans, but then you go Dolphins at home, at our Bengals, Texans, Lions, Chargers. Now, if all those teams are good, that's fine. But we live in a stochastic world, right? So like there's 2 wins in that cluster of games, and that keeps Marrone around long enough for them to care. That's my thing. I don't know.
I can't tell if they'd kept Ngakoue and Fournette and a couple more of those guys. I actually don't know if I would have felt better or worse about this pick, only because when things go badly in locker rooms and there are certain players who want out.
Thank you.
And there are 2 of them I just named. I think things tend to go south quicker. And I think the fact that they traded Ngakoue for not the value they should have gotten for him, but they traded for him, traded him regardless, and then they cut Fournette. I think that makes me feel slightly uneasy about this under bet. Maybe you get into what we're talking about, a Matt Rule situation where everybody is just playing for jobs the next season in October and November, but I just don't see a lot of talent here.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I feel really good about this first is, and this is you're kind of being a traitor here, Kevin, because as a mustache wearer now,
I know. I thought about this.
You are just
you guys got to stick together.
There's not many of you out there, and I really like Gardner Minshew, mustache aside, and the fact that you're kind of cleansing yourself of the players that might immediately go south gives you a chance, I think, to sustain a little bit longer. The hatred of Doug Marrone is unfair, and what they did in the draft.
I think Doug Marrone's a really good coach.
You hate Doug Marrone?
I don't hate Doug Marrone. I think he's a sitting duck, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
The players, dude. Look. I'm going to bring up my own playing experience here. I played for a head coach that got fired in college. The players freaking know, man. Like, they know by week 3. And I'm sorry, but there's just a little bit of, like, just a little quit. I'm sorry.
Read me the Jaguar schedule again.
Okay. Colts, Titans, Dolphins, Bengals, Texans, Lions, Chargers.
When Gardner Minshew has a fourth quarter comeback to beat the Colts.
Yeah. He's going to the Metrodome and beating the Vikings. There's no doubt about that.
All right, moving on. The NFC North. And this is an interesting one because I know where Eric lands on one of these teams, which is the Vikings. So we'll start there. The Vikings have a 9-game win total.
Under.
That's where Eric is. Kevin.
Darn it, this is hard. Over.
Okay. I have multiple U's by the Vikings. I'm going under. Kevin, support yourself.
I think that kind of what we were talking about earlier with continuity, I think that there is enough here where, again, I talked to Rick Spielman a couple of days ago. He thinks that there's, between Mike Zimmer, Kirk Cousins, the veterans on defense, the spine of the defense remains the same. You know, the interesting way about how they were built is they're a older team. I think they were the 4th oldest team by weighted snap average last year on defense, but most of it's homegrown guys. And so I feel like if you're going to do the continuity thing, even though the players themselves, I think they were only 16th in Sheil Kapadia's continuity rankings, but the guys who were there have been there a long time, and that trickles down. And by the way, they're talented. I wouldn't be making this case unless I thought they were talented. I think they are. Off not cutting Riley Reif a week before the season starts was important. I'm glad for their sake they got that done. I think they can eke out 10 wins here.
Man. My biggest thing, honestly, with them is that Kirk Cousins, to me, is not the guy that lifts. He's not the tide that lifts all boats. He's the other way around. He needs Stephon Diggs 7 yards open downfield off play action. And a lot of rookies, to me, this is not the year to bet on that.
They have to they lost 3 starting corners. They have no NFL caliber interior defensive linemen.
Which, most important.
Their offensive line can be good, but can also be a disaster. And they have one proven NFL receiver. And their schedule, which last season included like 6 backup quarterbacks, starts with Packers, Colts, Titans, Texans, Seahawks, Falcons, Packers, Lions.
Do they even win one of those games?
Well, I put it at 0.5. So I look, I like the Vikings long term, but this season I think they're going to be a mess.
Kevin, where would you put, let me set a line here, Kirk Cousins, top 13 NFL quarterback?
I think just outside.
I said a good line.
Just outside. I think like 15.
Okay.
And I think that if you have a talented roster, and I think they generally do, I acknowledge Eric's pointing out of the flaws in that roster, but I still think that they're okay. I think you can get double digits here.
If Adam Thielen gets hurt, are they just going to go running backs, fullbacks, and tight ends?
Yeah, I mean that's really.
Are they going to call you up, Eric? Is that Minnesota's only lost son, the prodigal son, returns? Okay, follow up question to that, Kevin, that I've been asked multiple times: Jimmy G or Kirk Cousins?
Well, I think Kyle Shanahan kind of made that evaluation when he wanted Cousins, and then kind of, I mean, if the narratives are true, they kind of stumbled upon Garoppolo, I guess you could say, because he was available. But I think it's Jimmy Garoppolo with Kyle Shanahan is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. But unfortunately, that's in a vacuum, I would take Cousins.
I think, and I don't mean to be flippant about this because I think Garoppolo is less talented than Kirk. But I don't think Garoppolo would ever say something as stupid as Kirk said today. And I think that there's a leadership aspect where the team would rally around Garoppolo to a degree that Kevin, I think that the collective that surrounds Garoppolo is so much better than Kirk.
Yep.
No one came to Kirk's defense. No one on that team came to his defense today. No one said, leave our quarterback alone. No one said.
Of course not.
And Kirk Cousins had to apologize last year when the receivers called him out.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Which is a problem.
Yeah.
I'm looking up Sando's quarterback tiers. He actually has Kirk Cousins 15th and Garoppolo 17th. But I thought it was funny that he quotes an anonymous coach saying that Kirk Cousins is, quote, the poster boy for tier 3.
There you go. The Niners would go to war with Jimmy G. And that's not the case for the Vikings. Okay. Packers 9. A lot of money on the under because people hate their draft. Over or under, Kevin?
I'm going over.
Eric?
Do I go all in on the Lions?
If Eric goes all in on the Lions, we're going to be here until 6 p.m.
Yeah, so, Jesus.
Okay. Over. I hate this. They're going to sweep the Vikings, so over. Sorry.
Yeah, I really struggled with this, and I went over 2 just because the price is pretty good. It's plus 130, and I want to fade the narrative that drafting Jordan Love is like this massively awful thing, and I'm all about the Aaron Rodgers revenge tour. I want it so badly. It would make the league so much better, and I root for great things that are happening in the NFL. So I'm going over. What's your thought on Aaron Rodgers? Because I'm all on the revenge tour. He is motivated, and that's the guy I want motivated.
I'm in agreement with you. I think Aaron Rodgers still has such a high ceiling. I know that there's in the analyst community some debate about that, but I think generally he is a net positive to have, even at the salary he has. I think that when you look at how this team is built, I think it's slightly weird that they tried to become San Francisco in one offseason when they still had Rodgers under contract and they didn't maximize that. But again, this is almost a cousin of the Houston thing, where everyone talks about the decisions they made, but when you actually just look at the 2020 depth chart, it's pretty good. And okay, they could have made it better with the draft or free agency or whatever, but they've still got some really, really good players, and that's what I'm betting on here.
In or out on LaFleur?
Long term in.
Okay. Eric, in or out?
I need to see more, but I'm not going to dismiss him immediately.
Okay. I'm kind of out. I'm kind of out on the leader of men part of the thing.
Okay. How about let's do a quick one here. Bears.
Under 8.5.
Under. Okay.
Okay. Now you can get to the Lions. I know where you were at 6.5. I'm curious if you're still going to bet them at plus one or minus 170, which I think is what it is.
Yeah.
You are? Okay. Kevin.
I mean, a win is worth like 50 cents. So I bet them over 7. So like.
Kevin, Lions. You buying
Under. I am. This is a pro Matthew Stafford take. I love Matthew Stafford. I hope one day he finds football happiness. I don't think it's going to happen this year.
The best offense in the NFC North, and you're going under.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is not. You got one of you guys was shorting LaFleur. It was George who was because he was not a leader of men. That's the Patricia. That's the Patricia bucket for me. I think LaFleur is a better leader of men than Matt Patricia.
But Matt Stafford, a leader of men.
Yeah, more of like a. I know this is a weird comparison to make, but more of like a Marcus Mariota type leader, where he's not going to give some great Tebow-esque speech in the locker room. He's more just going to go out and get the crap knocked out of him and get up every single time. I think that's the respect he commands in Detroit.
I'm again disappointed that a man with such a prominent mustache would just dismiss the type of respect that chugging a beer the way that Matt Stafford can chug a beer earns you in a locker room.
I do think that is the one concern that I have. I think if Jim Caldwell was the head coach of the Detroit Lions, I think this number would be a lot higher.
Wow.
Yeah.
They definitely should have kept Jim Caldwell.
Yeah. I mean, if you coach Wayne Fonts didn't even get Detroit. like Kevin, he won 3.
Kevin, I've heard Wayne Fonts' name on podcasts 8 times.
Well, maybe it's because he was the head coach of the Lions last time they won a division, and it wasn't even the NFC North.
Oh man,
Jim Caldwell took that dog-ass franchise to 3 winning seasons in 4 years,
agree.
And he got fired for what? What did he get fired for? I don't get it.
I have a take, and I'm not going to say it. I don't know.
And bless him, he's had some health issues. My thing is he was a good head coach.
He went 36-28 with the Lions, and they fired him.
He went 14-0 with the Colts his first year. Yeah. Before
he's 12 games over 500 for his career, and that includes the time they went
that Curtis Painter year.
Curtis Painter, Kerry Collins was involved in that team.
Yeah. Dan Orlovsky, our friend.
Our friend Dan Orlovsky, all of our friends.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this. I think his disposition allowed him to be fired. The fact that he was a quiet guy that didn't have, if he was a rah-rah guy.
Wasn't good with the media.
Yeah, it would have made it harder to fire him.
But what's funny is that they replaced him with a guy who's also bad at the media.
Yeah, worse,
and is
probably.
Also not a rah-rah guy.
Right. And
it's not like they hired Dick Vermeil afterwards.
Dude, it's interesting because I am also out on Patricia. I'm out on a lot of coaches, but I just have so much faith in Matt Stafford and that offense. Okay, the AFC North. The Baltimore Ravens, 11.5, the tied for the highest win total in the NFL with the Chiefs. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this one, Kevin. Over or under?
Over.
Wow. Okay.
This is the exact same reasoning for the Chiefs. Under.
Okay. I'm going under. Kevin, I'll give you the first word.
Yeah. Same argument I've made for most of the elite teams that I've had going over, which is that I don't see a real path, aside from health, for them to lose 6, 7, 8 games. I just don't see that. I think that there's a baseline when it's John Harbaugh, Greg Roman, and Lamar Jackson, and all of those pieces are clicking. I think that the next step is something we talked about on my podcast. The next step is the deep ball if it gets there, even though there's some argument that maybe that doesn't even need work, and maybe it's the intermediate throws. But I just see improvement, and I also see, again, it's really hard to be the Steelers or the Bengals or the Browns and saying we're going to devote our entire offseason to stopping Lamar Jackson 2 weeks out of the year, and then all of those instances come on Zoom.
Yeah. So my question to you would be, last year they went on a "we're showing you" world tour because everyone was out on Lamar Jackson, and they stomped on people, and you could tell that was their goal. This year, they don't need to do that. All they need to do is win a playoff game. Does that take some of the juice out of the random middle of the year, road game, and they're not as dominant?
No, I think that any of that will be offset by the fact that defenses will be flat-footed. Maybe listen, some of these coaches think that there's going to be some tackling problems earlier in the year. Can you imagine what's going to happen if Lamar Jackson is going against a bunch of defenses that haven't gotten their tackling up to speed? Good Lord. I just think enough things offset to where they can still be a dominant team.
Yeah, I
don't know. You better get that C-do signed.
I think for them, just for me, it's one of those where I like this under more for them than Kansas City because they depend on defense to put themselves in positions where Lamar Jackson can control the tempo of the game with the running, and no Earl, possibility for more injuries.
No Seth.
Yeah, Seth too. Seth's gone. But then, so more possibility.
I didn't even get a smile from Kevin on that.
Yeah, so I just I think they're more fragile. They're good, of course. The second most likely team to win the Super Bowl, in my opinion, but a little fragility there.
Yeah, I mean they just led so frequently in those games. I'm really, this is one of the maybe 3 or 4 teams that I'm most excited to watch this year. The Cleveland Browns also up there, 8.5 with Kevin Stefanski. This was hilarious. It was 9 last year. The Cleveland Browns win total last year was 9, and if I remember correctly, people were running to bet over and that they would make it to the Super Bowl. We've somehow tempered our anticipation of the Cleveland Browns. Kevin, 8.5.
I remember last year. It was a very strange time.
It was 10 years ago.
It was 100 years ago. Okay, so I have over. I think that this division, similar to the AFC South, is top heavy.
Yep. And
I think that there are 3 teams here that have a real chance to win double-digit games, and the Cleveland Browns are one of them.
I'm over.
Okay. I really struggled with this, and I went under, and it just felt to me like an 8-8 team. I think there's still going to be a lot for them to figure out, and I think we're still a year too early on them. Because last year to me was a setback year where there was a lot of no improvement, and I just think they need 1 year of Kevin Stefanski, and then next year I'm buying in.
Yeah, I mean, Well, go. Ask the question about the Steelers, because I personally will take the Browns wins over the Steelers wins.
Okay, Steelers. It's 9.5. Is that right?
Yep, it is.
Man,
because I've taken it under.
Kevin.
So my concern here is that I have two top-heavy divisions, and they actually play each other. And at some point, there just stops being enough wins to go around.
Right.
I think it's hugely valuable when you get to learn a ton about your team in a season. Like the Browns got to figure out exactly what was wrong with them last year as the wheels came off the wagon, right? The Steelers got to see a season without Ben Roethlisberger and figure out what to do next from it now they get Ben Roethlisberger back. I like them as a playoff team, but I'm just starting to worry about the wins. I'm going under, I think, 9 wins, and I think that they're in the mix for that last playoff spot.
They led the league a season ago in the percentage of drives that ended in a turnover. They had almost no injuries on the defense after Minkah Fitzpatrick showed up. And they got pretty good years out of their pass rush, which I think might be a product of their schedule. Cleveland has a top 5 schedule in terms of easiness in the league. Pittsburgh more in the middle of the pack. I think they're kind of comfortably at 8 wins, 9 wins.
Yeah. I would be like definitely betting the under here, except that it's the odds aren't great. What I found really interesting was that their win total last year was 9, and I'm kind of trying to figure out why it's higher this year, because the Browns have improved, the Bengals have improved.
They showed a great deal
of they overcame adversity, but that there were a lot of things there like turnovers, which are going to regress, and that's adversity they're going to have to overcome.
That's right. I mean, I think you're right. I think, Kevin, you said this on the show, maybe when we were on your show, but it's like they showed a lot of heart. I think Tomlin went possibly from a coach that could have been on his way out. He's approaching, or I think eclipsed, Bill Cowher's tenure in Pittsburgh already. Like there was a path for him to be on the way out last year, and I think the way they won 8 of the middle 10 games of the year, and it's like, I think people are buying into that way more with Roethlisberger coming back, and less so looking at sort of the noise that was associated with him, as well as the last time we saw Big Ben, he had Antonio Brown.
He was bigger.
Yeah, he had Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster. Now he's got kind of a regressed Smith-Schuster with no Brown.
Yeah, the defensive regression for me is what it's all about. Okay, the Bengals, 5.5. Over is juiced. Yeah, our Cincinnati Bengals. Kevin, this is the beautiful Cincinnati Bengals practice field. This is Cincinnati here. You intrigued?
How are they looking?
I actually can see them from my office, which is also my studio in Cincinnati. And having watched them live, I can tell you, people that don't get to watch them live wouldn't know this, but seeing them live, I can tell there's a crispness and a leadership quality to Burrow.
They look great.
Yeah, they look fantastic. 5.5.
I'm going under in the same way I'm going under with the Jaguars, which I don't hate everything about them.
Why do you hate Joe Burrow?
I love Joe Burrow. I love the thought they're putting into that team and building it, and I like the pieces. But I think there's a lot of talent in that division, and I think that I don't want to be playing the Baltimore Ravens or the Browns or the Steelers because they have better rosters, and I just start to worry about where the wins are coming from.
Here's a hot take for this year. Tyler Boyd is going to challenge for some. Tyler Boyd might have top 5 to 10 receiver stats this year. He's been one of the most underrated players in the league for the last few years with bad quarterback play. He excels from the slot, and that was the Justin Jefferson routes were really what Burrow excelled with when he was at LSU. I think their offensive line certainly needs work, but the skill positions there, as well as the changes they've made in the secondary, I think they're a fundamentally better team.
I have a similarly hot take on the Bengals. To me, Joe Burrow has the best rookie season since Russell Wilson, maybe better. And the reason I believe that is that, I get that the offensive line is bad. The offensive line at LSU, sneaky, wasn't that great. And this is the guy that I want when I have a bad offensive line. He's smart. He'll get the ball out quickly when he needs to, and he's sneaky athletic. And I really like the weapons there. So I'm going over with my hometown Bengals, mostly because I want some excitement. Last year, Kevin, when I would be heading to the office on a Sunday, right before the 1 p.m. games. You can see my apartment building over there
from your house.
Yes. And there were 10-1 more people walking away from the stadium to the bar than there were walking to the stadium. It's incredible.
Amazing.
All right, the moment we've all been waiting for, the second moment we've all been waiting for after the Falcons, the NFC West. San Francisco 49ers, 10.5. It was 8.5 last year. They obviously outperformed that substantially. Where are you going with this, Kevin?
I think 10 wins sounds right. I'm going to go the under.
Eric?
With you. Under.
Yeah, I'm under, and this is one that I did bet earlier, and I'm actually worried about the 49ers.
Oh!
Yeah. I'm officially I'm a fairly logical fan. I'm legitimately worried. I think defensive regression just happens. Richard Sherman, as much as I love him, he is not getting younger, certainly, right? At some point, I think he went all in last year. And the other corner is a real question. And they are getting hit with injuries on the offensive side of the ball. So as brilliant as Kyle Shanahan is, to me, 10.5 is just way too high. I would take 10 wins. Kevin, you give me 10 wins right now, I am grabbing them and running.
I'm surprised by that. I think that Shanahan is kind of in that Andy Reid zone for me, where I just think there's a baseline of confidence he's always going to have. The difference, obviously, is we've seen Shanahan in some awful situations, but when Garoppolo got hurt, for instance, and he's got Mullins and Beathard and those guys, and I think that they can't win less than 9 games. I think it's 9 or 10.
Wow.
I just think that.
I love that.
What?
They can't win less than 9 games.
I think with their roster as currently constructed, the only thing that can prevent them from going under 500 or over 500 is health.
Okay.
Maybe we're already on the path to that, because Deebo Samuel's out with the first couple weeks of the season. I don't know. Richard Sherman obviously has battled injuries the last handful of years, but obviously he was incredible last year, and I think he'll stay on the field this year. I'm just saying they got beat up pretty bad last year with injuries. When I was in San Francisco last year doing the George Kittle piece, there were people saying to me like, "Man, Weston Richburg, that is a huge injury. I don't know what's going to happen now." And then they overcame it. And so I think the depth they have, the coaching they have, the scheme they have, the stars they have who are able to overcome certain things, I think you're looking at a 10-win division winner, and I think a Super Bowl contender. I
am going under. I do like the 10 wins, and if they win 10 games, I think it's because Jimmy G gets into the top 10 from a quarterbacking perspective. And to me, and it's partially because of Shanahan, my belief in Shanahan, but I'm all aboard for the same reasons that I'm all off the Kirk Cousins thing. I am on the Jimmy G thing. And
the Niners have a very easy schedule in the first 6 weeks. And I
not
think,
too dissimilar from last season.
Yeah, so I think
but the Cardinals are going to be better than they were last year. And I think there were three over 500 teams last year in that division. I don't think that necessarily changes all that much this year. I just worry, again, where the wins are going to come from if they're going to rattle off 13 to 14 wins. It's not like last year. Yeah. I think the Cardinals are going to be a little more competitive.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the thing is they got lucky in that their injuries happened during an easier stretch. But to your point, let's talk about the Cardinals. We're
7.5.
7.5.
Go.
I think this is the. Go ahead, Kevin. I want to hear what you say first.
I'm going to say under, but I also think that they're going to play like a team that can win any game, and Kyler Murray is going to play unbelievably. I just don't see, when I think about the jumps we've seen from year 1 to year 2, whether that's Mahomes, who wasn't even a full-time starter in his first year but then won the MVP in his second year, or Lamar Jackson, who took over halfway through and then won the MVP in his second year. When I think about Kyler Murray, the difference is I just don't see the same infrastructure. Kansas City and Baltimore are just two of the best franchises in the NFL. The Cardinals are not. So we might see a thing we haven't seen in a little bit, which is a player play like an MVP in their second year and do so for a 6-win team.
7 and 9 win team. I feel exactly the same.
Same. I both like plus 240 to make the playoffs. I think that's mispriced, but I also like under. I think there's a couple. There's
a little middle there.
Yeah. Well, not a little middle, but it's they're
unevenly priced.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. Okay, I'm curious where the Seahawks. So I said last week that in one of my bold predictions, the Seahawks are in the Super Bowl, and it's kind of a reverse jinx, but I see the path here, and based on how well Russell Wilson played last year, Tyler Lockett getting hurt at the end of the year, I thought really hurt them, and Jamal Adams. I don't agree with the trade. I wouldn't have made the trade, but in 1 year, I can definitely see people going, see, this is why they made the trade. So Seahawks 9.5. I guess I told you. I think they go over. Kevin.
I agree with you. Eric, I'll get to my reasoning. I don't want to. I was going to launch into a let Russ cook thing, and then I realized that we were going to be here for an hour if I did that. So I just said Eric and stepped away.
Yeah,
gotta cool down.
I just think, man, I say under just because I think the likelihood that the Seahawks play calling staying the same is higher than the likelihood that Russell Wilson's brilliance stays the same.
Fair. Okay, Kevin. Let him cook.
So I think that if we're outlining the teams that can be successful this year, the Seahawks are the type of team that would. Established quarterback who can make plays, who can solve problems on the fly, a coach who understands how to build a team very quickly and has adapted. Remember, Pete Carroll, a lot of times these guys who have been good coaches for 20 years, they're so adaptable because the rules of the sport have changed so much. When these guys first started to come in the 80s or 90s or in the 70s in some cases, you could do whatever you wanted. And then it would get, a little bit more limited. And all of a sudden, someone like Pete Carroll probably had to change their training camp regimen a million times. And so 14 padded practices are just not a big deal. You can figure that out. And they have established veterans on the roster, kind of what we were talking about. So I think it comes down to if they're comfortable with the philosophy change on offense and they let, sorry to say, Russ cook and let him just solve the problems he's capable of solving in a very weird year. And I think they might open it up a little bit more. And if they do, I think you're looking at probably 10 wins.
My thought on that is, because I've said this, okay, they have Jamal Adams, they have a better defense, they decide to run the ball more. But maybe they look at it the totally different way and they go, you know what? Our defense can help us even if Russell throws an interception here or there. Let's just go for it. We saw the Niners last year go and just dominate the division. And I know those games with them are close, but let's not come down to those last, couple of plays with the Niners. Let's go out and win a bunch of games. And that's my nightmare. So it's probably going to come true. Let's go to the Rams. 8.5 or 9. I've seen both. Which one would you guys like to do?
I don't care what the number is. Actually, I'm going to go under.
Whoa.
Okay.
The Rams are my biggest fade this year.
Kevin?
I'm going under as well, but they're not my biggest fade. I feel okay about them. I just don't see over 500. I think 7 wins seems right.
Yeah, I'm going under, and I'm very curious what the narrative is when if they go 7-9. What are we talking about with this Rams team? Because that to me would be a real indictment on the contract they gave Jared Goff and the moves that they've made to kind of put together these superstars. And I'm curious what the take is on Sean McVay. What's your take on Sean McVay, Kevin?
So I just talked to Peter Schrager for my podcast this morning, and he's hosting a Hard Knocks podcast. And he's been talking to Sean McVay, Kevin Demoff for this podcast. And he thinks that they are thinking Super Bowl and that they have reset their expectations in a way that is consistent with where they were 2 years ago. And I think after having seen the offensive line last year, I think after having seen just the weird stuff that was happening to them last year, I have a hard time believing that they're going to reach those heights. And I think Sean McVay is a very, very, very good coach. But I also think that roster was really good. And I think that I think that one of the things I did after the Super Bowl, the day after the Super Bowl last year, was I just put up a poll. Would you rather have Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay? I just wanted to see the experiment of it all. And it was about 94% for Kyle Shanahan right now. And if you had done it a year prior, it would have been obviously flipped. I mean, nobody would have taken Kyle Shanahan over Sean McVay, except maybe our dear friend Robert Mays and John Lynch and George. So there's the three. So
Holy Trinity.
I think that there's some. I think that unfortunately I kind of made a joke about how Sean McVay was a new Chip Kelly last year because he just seemed to have one kind of scheme in his arsenal and couldn't make adjustments.
8 plays.
And I kind of regret making that joke because I think people took it seriously. But I also think that part of being a coach is adapting. And this is what we're talking about, where, it's not like he's been doing this for 20 years. He's been a head coach for 4. And I'm intrigued to see what the next step of Sean McVay is, the next evolution of McVay is. And I think that he's a top 10 coach for me, just because I don't think there's many humans on earth who could have made Jared Goff that good from one year to the next. But I also think that he's got to have a few more bullets in the gun.
I need to see something different. I need to see something other than the 8 plays that we've seen.
What do you guys make of the fact that when he became head coach, he kept Fossil around as one of the best special teams coordinators? Mm-hmm. He immediately hired Wade Phillips and now they're gone, and he's sort of trying to establish sort of his culture. I don't know if his independent culture is that smart. I'm not a huge fan of those moves.
I don't know. Are those? Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought of that, Kevin. To me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
I think it's interesting. So they hire Staley, who comes from the Vic Fangio tree. And I think that there's a little bit of momentum that he might be a really good play caller. And I think that defensive play caller. And I think that this is probably time for Sean McVay to start building his own staff and getting his own guys in. I think Wade Phillips is still really, really good. I wish there was some way to keep him in the building as an assistant, almost like, I know it's a little different, but almost like what Gary Kubiak has been in Minnesota before he took the offensive coordinator job this year, where he's just in the building and helping out. But he's 73 years old, and I think Sean McVay probably wanted a different direction and quote unquote culture. However, what we've been talking about the past 2 hours is that if you want to build a culture, if you want to be Joe Judge this year, it's a hard year to do that. So again, there's no way to have known when they're making these decisions at the end of the year that you wouldn't have been able to meet in person from February until July. Okay. So it's a weird year, but I just think if you're trying to build up your own identity this year on the coaching staff, tough year to do it. Might take another year.
It's a shame because I love Jalen Ramsey. I love Aaron Donald. I'm drafting defensive players. They're right up there. So
I'm against the whole stars and scrubs though. So
right.
The
it's
philosophy
tough.
sucks. Unfortunately, because we love these trophies of players. To have an Aaron Donald is one of the best accomplishments that franchise is ever going to have. And yet, as far as wins are concerned, unfortunately, the needle doesn't move a ton with respect to what he does.
That is every single team and their win total. And I think it's kind of impressive we did it under 2 hours. I'm kind of impressed. We could have gone on for a long time.
I'm impressed we got out of the Lions discussion.
Alive.
I'm impressed. I think that there's a timeline in the multiverse where we're still in that thing.
Oh, my God. I've talked about the Lions too much this offseason. Kevin Clark of The Ringer, pimp some things that are coming from you this season.
Yeah, Slow News Day debuts on 9/8, not 9/7. Ringer NFL show. Jeff Fisher is an incredible guest, and we got some really cool things coming in September, October, the whole season. The Ringer NFL show, Peter Schrager on Wednesday. Cowboys episode on Friday, Bob Sturman and Brian Curtis. It's going to be really fun this year. Have some announcements coming up about the Ringer NFL show soon, and it'll be really fun.
Awesome. Kevin Clark. Thank you, buddy. Big thanks to Kevin Clark for being so generous with his time. I mean, I didn't expect it to take that long. And then after the first division, I was worried that we'd be here all night. We rallied, but it was a lot of fun. So thanks to him for hanging out. Like I said, next Monday, I'm going to tell Eric this airplane story. I think it's going to be really good. I think he'll enjoy it. So have a good weekend. Last weekend without football. See you guys on Monday. Peace out.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.